Every day, 7-year-old Tommy pressed his small face against the glass of his bedroom window, watching the neighborhood children playing together in the park across the street. His eyes filled with longing and sadness as he observed the games. He couldn't join, confined to his house by a rare immune disorder that made the outside world dangerous for him. Nobody seemed to notice the pale little boy behind the window, his presence a silent witness to the childhood. He was missing until one rainy Tuesday afternoon when Mark Davis, a retired elementary school teacher, was walking his dog and happened to glance up at the second-story window. What happened next would transform not just Tommy's isolated existence, but an entire community's understanding of what it means to truly see someone who has been invisible, if you believe in the power of simple acts of kindness to change lives. Please subscribe to our channel now for more heartwarming stories that restore faith in humanity. Tommy's bedroom window faced Maple Street Park. Tommy's bedroom window faced Maple Street Park, the most popular gathering spot in the neighborhood, where children played kickball in summer, built snowmen in winter, and spent countless hours on the swings and slides all year round. From his second story perch, Tommy had a perfect view of childhood joys he could only experience as an observer. His mother, Elaine, had transformed his bedroom into a cheerful space with bright blue walls covered in space, themed decals, a bookshelf overflowing with adventures he could read about but never have, and a special cushioned window seat where he spent most of his waking hours, his small hands often pressed against the glass as if trying to reach through the barrier that separated him from the world, severe combined immunodeficiency disorder the doctors had explained to Elaine when Tommy was just an infant, a rare condition that left him with virtually no functioning immune system, meaning even a common cold could be life-threatening, the outside world teeming with invisible dangers that could harm her son in ways most parents couldn't imagine. For 7 years, Elaine had protected Tommy with rigorous protocols, air purifiers throughout their small house, visitors limited, and screened daily sanitizing of everything that entered their home, and most importantly, keeping Tommy safely within these protective walls. His only glimpses of normal childhood coming through glass and screens, Tommy understood his situation with a maturity that sometimes broke his mother's heart. "I'm like one of those astronauts, Mom," he'd told her once, pointing to a book about space exploration. "I'm in my own special bubble, and I need special equipment to survive outside. It's not so bad, really." But Elaine saw the longing in his eyes when he watched the neighborhood children playing, saw how he carefully documented their games in a small notebook, even naming the children he'd never met: Jamie with the red baseball cap, who could throw farther than anyone Sophia with; the purple sneakers, who was the fastest runner; Tyler, who always brought his soccer ball. Tommy had created an observation station at his window, complete with a pair of binoculars his grandmother had given him for Christmas, and a star chart that he'd repurposed to track the children's activities, recording who played with whom, which games were most popular, what time the park was busiest. His own scientific study of the childhood he couldn't have today. The park was especially busy with the early spring weather bringing everyone outside. After a long winter, Tommy watched as a new family unloaded bikes from their car, 3 children approximately his age. He noted in his observation book, new neighbors on Oak Street, 2 boys, 1 girl. Bikes are blue, green, and pink. He was so absorbed in his observation that he almost missed the familiar figure of Mrs. Reynolds walking her poodle, stopping to chat with Mr. Chen, who was out gardening. Tommy knew all the adults' routines too, the regulars, whose daily patterns gave structure to his window-watching ritual. "Mommy?" he called out as Elaine passed his door carrying a basket of laundry. "Did you know there's a new family on Oak Street? They have 3 kids and bikes." Elaine paused in the doorway. "That's nice, sweetie," she said, her smile not quite reaching her tired eyes. "How do you know they're from Oak Street?" Tommy pointed to his notebook. "I've been tracking all the new people. They came from the direction of Oak, and their car has been parked in front of the blue house with the for sale sign. Since yesterday," he reported with the precision of a seasoned detective. Elaine shook her head in amazement at her son's attention to detail. "That's very observant of you," she said, glancing at her ray. "Watch, I need to finish this laundry before my shift tonight. Mrs. Parker will be here at 5 to stay with you while I'm at work." Ike Tommy nodded absently. Already back to his window, his mother's evening shifts as a nurse at the local hospital were just another part of the routine. He understood that she needed to work to pay for his treatments, his medications, their home. But the evenings were always lonelier without her. As the afternoon wore on, the park began to empty. Children called home. For dinner, the shadows lengthening across the grass. Tommy was about to move away from his window when a movement caught his eye. A man he hadn't seen before, walking a golden retriever along the path that circled the park. The man was older, maybe. As old as his grandfather had been before he died, with silver hair and glasses. The dog trotting happily beside him, pausing occasionally to sniff at interesting spots. Tommy watched with interest as they made their slow circuit of the park, noting. In his book, New Dog Walker, approx. 4:30 p.m., Golden Retriever. Very well behaved, Tommy expected them to continue past like everyone else did, but something unexpected happened as the man and dog reached the point in the path directly across from Tommy's house. The golden retriever stopped, suddenly tail wagging as it stared up at Tommy's window, the man following the dog's gaze until his eyes met Tommy's. For a moment, Tommy froze, unused to being seen by the people he observed. The man seemed equally surprised. Then, to Tommy's astonishment, the stranger smiled and raised his hand in a friendly wave. Tommy hesitated, then shyly waved back, his heart beating faster at this unexpected interaction. The man's smile widened as he gave a small bow that made Tommy giggle, then continued on his way, the golden retriever looking back once more before they turned the corner and disappeared from view. That night, as Mrs. Parker read him a story before bed, Tommy couldn't stop thinking about the man with the golden retriever and the simple wave that had somehow made him feel less invisible than he had in a very long time. The next day, Tommy positioned himself at his window earlier than usual, hoping to see the man and dog again, but they didn't appear. The day after that brought rain, keeping most people indoors. But on the third day, just as Tommy was beginning to think he'd imagined the whole interaction, he spotted them again, the golden retriever leading the way, its coat shining like honey in the afternoon sun. This time, when they reached the spot across from Tommy's window, the man seemed to be looking for him, his face lighting up when he spotted Tommy already waiting and waving enthusiastically. The golden retriever barking once, as if in greeting, before they continued their walk. By the end of the week, Tommy had adjusted his observation schedule to make sure he never missed the man and dog, who now appeared every afternoon between 4:15 and 4:45. Each wave, each smile making Tommy feel a little less alone, a little more connected to the world outside his window. Mark Davis hadn't intended to become friends with a child he'd never met. It had happened almost by accident that first rainy Tuesday when Buddy had stopped, suddenly staring up at a second-story window where a small pale face was pressed against the glass. Something about the boy's expression, so wistful and lonely, had tugged at Mark's heart, reminding him of certain children he'd taught over his 37-year career. The quiet ones who needed someone to simply notice them after that. First wave Mark found himself looking for the boy each day during his afternoon walks with Buddy. He'd been a fifth-grade teacher before retiring 2 years ago, after his wife Carol's passing had left him rattling around in their family home alone, except for Buddy the golden retriever, who had been Carol's last gift to him before cancer took her away. The walks had become Mark's salvation in those dark months after losing Carol, a way to structure his days and connect with the neighborhood. When the emptiness of retirement threatened to overwhelm him, Buddy's enthusiastic presence forcing him out of the house even on days when grief made it hard to get out of bed. Now these walks had taken on new meaning with the addition of what Mark had come to think of as the window visit. He found himself timing their route to make sure they passed the Blue House at approximately the same time each day, feeling a surprising disappointment on the rare occasions when the boy wasn't at his post. Who is that child? Mark wondered. After nearly 2 weeks of their silent exchange of waves, he'd lived in this neighborhood for over 30 years and thought he knew most of the families, yet he'd never seen this boy outside playing with the other children despite the park being directly across the street. His curiosity finally got the better of him one afternoon as he passed Janet Chen, tending her legendary rose garden. Janet had been the neighborhood's unofficial information hub for as long as anyone could remember. Lovely day, isn't it? Janet, Mark called, pausing to let Buddy sniff around the mailbox post while he casually leaned on the fence. The roses are looking spectacular this year. Jeanette straightened up, pushing her gardening hat back with a gloved hand. Mark Davis, is that you? Making small talk? She teased. What do you really want to know? Mark laughed. Janet's directness was one of the things he'd always appreciated about her. Actually, I was wondering about the family in the blue house across from the park, he admitted, particularly the little boy. I see him watching from the upstairs window, but never outside playing. Janet's expression softened. Ah, you've noticed, Tommy, she said, her voice lowering slightly, as if sharing a confidence. Poor little thing has some kind of immune problem. Can't go outside much from what I understand. Mark felt a pang of sympathy. That explains it. His mother's a nurse, works nights at Memorial from what Mrs. Parker tells me, Janet continued, referring to the elderly woman who apparently helped with Tommy's care. She's raising him alone, has been since he was a baby. Not an easy situation. Mark nodded, processing this information which explained so much about the boy's isolation. Thank you, Janet. I appreciate the background, he said, already planning how he might brighten Tommy's day beyond their simple waves. The next afternoon, Mark brought Buddy to sit on a bench directly across from Tommy's window, letting the golden retriever perform some of his best tricks: sit, stay, roll over paw. The boy's delight visible even from a distance as he clapped his hands against the glass. Buddy hamming it up, as if he understood he had a special audience. The following day, Mark noticed something. Knew a handmade sign taped to Tommy's window with large, careful letters spelling out, "Hi, my name is Tommy." Mark grinned and pulled a small notebook from his pocket quickly, writing his own sign in large block letters. "Hi, Tommy, I'm Mark, and this is..." Buddy holding it up for the boy to read. Tommy's face lit up with joy at this new level of communication, bouncing with excitement before disappearing from the window, only to return moments later with another sign. How old is Buddy? And so began their written conversations, Mark always carrying his notebook and marker on walks. Buddy sitting patiently as his owner held up responses to Tommy's questions, each exchange slightly longer than the last. Mark learning that Tommy was 7, that his favorite color was blue, that he loved books about space and animals, that he'd never had a pet of his own. A bond was forming between the retired teacher and the isolated boy, something that filled a void in both their lives. Mark found himself thinking about what might interest Tommy, planning little surprises to brighten his day. Buddy seemed to understand the importance of their window visits too, always leading Mark to their special bench across from the blue house, always performing his best tricks. When Tommy was watching, one afternoon about 3 weeks into their silent friendship, Mark had a new idea, tucking a children's book into his jacket pocket alongside his usual notebook. As they approached Tommy's window, he waved, as always, then held up a sign, "New plan, can you hear me if I talk?" Loud. Tommy's expression was puzzled, then excited. As he opened his window a few inches and gave a thumbs up, Mark positioned himself on the bench directly across from the house, took out the book, a classic about a child and his dog, and began to read, projecting his voice, as he had done for decades in classrooms, his teacher voice carrying clearly across the quiet street. From his window, Tommy listened transfixed as Mark brought the story to life using different voices for different characters, exaggerating his expressions to make Tommy laugh. Buddy sitting attentively beside his owner, as if he too were enjoying story time, Several neighbors slowed their walks to listen, some smiling at the unusual scene of an older man reading aloud to a second-story window. When the story ended, Tommy applauded enthusiastically, holding up a hastily made sign that was awesome. "More tomorrow, please, Mark," bowed theatrically, promising to return the next day with another book, his heart lighter than it had been in months as he and Buddy continued their walk at dinner that night. Tommy couldn't stop talking about his new friend Mark, and Buddy did tricks, and then he read me a whole story from the park bench. Mom and everyone could hear, and Buddy sat. So good listening, and Mark does all the character voices just like you do. Lane watched her son's animated excitement with a mixture of gratitude and caution. She'd noticed the older man's interactions with Tommy over the past weeks, had even waved to him once from the front door, appreciating his kindness to her son. But the protective instincts of a mother with a medically vulnerable child couldn't be completely silenced. Who is this man exactly? She wondered as she served Tommy his carefully prepared dinner. What did she really know about him beyond his first name and his golden retriever? Yet she couldn't deny the positive effect these brief interactions were having on Tommy, who now rushed to his window each afternoon with an anticipation that had been missing from his isolated life. Maybe it was time to learn more about the man who had somehow managed to bring the outside world a little closer to her son's window, the man who had noticed Tommy when so many others simply walked by. Mark sat at his kitchen table that evening, a blank sheet of stationery before him, tapping his pen thoughtfully against his chin. Buddy lying at his feet with a contented sigh. The house quiet, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock that had been Carol's pride and joy. Writing a letter to a child shouldn't be this difficult. He thought, especially after 37 years of teaching, but somehow this felt different, more personal. "Dear Tommy," he finally began, "I hope this letter finds you. Well, I've enjoyed our window conversations and story time these past weeks, and thought perhaps you might enjoy having a proper pen pal. My name is Mark Davis, and I live in the Yellow House 3 blocks from the park. I was a 5th grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary for many years before retiring 2 years ago. Buddy, my golden retriever, is 6 years old and was originally trained as a therapy dog, which is why he knows so many tricks." Mark continued writing, telling Tommy about his favorite books as a child, his hobby of bird watching, his small vegetable garden that he was preparing for spring planting. He kept the tone light and friendly, ending with, "If your mom approves, perhaps we could become regular letter friends. I'll leave this in your mailbox tomorrow during our walk. Buddy sends a friendly woof, and I send my best wishes, your window friend Mark." The next day, Mark placed the sealed envelope in the Blue House's mailbox before continuing to their usual spot across from Tommy's window. The boy was already there, waiting, his face lighting up at the sight of them. Mark held up his sign, "Special delivery in your mailbox." Tommy's excitement was visible even from a distance as he disappeared from view, presumably to tell his mother about the letter. Mark waited, continuing their usual routine of tricks and waves. But Tommy didn't return to the window, making Mark wonder if perhaps he'd overstepped a boundary with his letter initiative. His concern was short-lived the following afternoon. Tommy was back at his window with renewed enthusiasm, holding up a sign, "Mom says I can write back." The boy's face glowing with happiness at this new connection to the outside world. Over the next few weeks, a steady correspondence developed between them, Mark leaving letters in Tommy's mailbox twice a week, Tommy's replies appearing there a day later, each exchange revealing more about their lives, their interests, their everyday thoughts of friendship, blossoming through carefully penned words on paper in one letter. Tommy wrote, "I have to take 17 pills every day and have special treatments, but Mom says maybe someday there will be a cure for my SIDE. That's what my condition is called, severe combined immunodeficiency disorder. It means my body can't fight germs very well, so I have to stay inside where it's safe. Do you think Buddy would like me? If he could meet me for real?" Mark's heart ached at the matter-of-fact way Tommy described his isolation at the longing behind. His simple question about Buddy and his reply. He wrote, "Buddy would absolutely adore you, Tommy. He has a special sense about people, and he already considers you his friend. That's why he always sits so attentively during our window visits." Golden Retrievers are exceptional judges of character, and Buddy has given you his highest approval. Through their letters, Mark learned more about Tommy's daily life, his homeschooling routine, his favorite games, his dreams of someday becoming an astronomer. His collection of model planets hanging from his bedroom ceiling. He learned about Elaine, Tommy's mother, her dedication to her son, her exhausting schedule of night shifts at the hospital, her efforts to give Tommy as normal a childhood as possible. Within the confines of his medical condition, in return, Mark shared stories of his teaching years, his life with Carol, the adventures he and Buddy had on their walks. He sent Tommy small treasures that could be sanitized per Elaine's instructions. Interesting rocks from the lakeshore, pressed flowers from his garden, a magnifying glass for Tommy's scientific observations, all accompanied by notes explaining their significance. Their window visits continued as well, evolving to include regular storytime sessions, Mark's teacher voice carrying across the street as he read chapters from books. He thought Tommy might enjoy neighbors growing accustomed to the sight of the older man and his golden retriever performing for the boy in the window, some even stopping to listen, occasionally applauding at the end of a particularly dramatic reading one rainy Thursday, as Mark was reading the final chapter of Charlotte's Web. His umbrella propped against his shoulder to keep the book dry, he noticed several children from the park had gathered around him listening intently to the story, their bikes abandoned nearby. The emotional conclusion bringing tears to more than one pair of eyes. "That was awesome," one boy said when Mark finished. "Is this like a regular thing?" Mark nodded every afternoon around 4:30. "I read to my friend Tommy," he explained, gesturing toward the window where Tommy was clearly visible. "He can't come outside due to a medical condition, so we bring the stories to him." The children looked up at Tommy with new interest, several of them waving spontaneously when they noticed him, watching the boy's surprised delight, evident as he waved back enthusiastically. "You could come listen any time if you'd like," Mark offered. Recognizing an opportunity, "I'm starting a new book tomorrow." A few of the children promised they would before pedaling away on their bikes, looking back over their shoulders at the window where Tommy still watched. Mark felt a surge of hope at this small breakthrough, the first acknowledgement of Tommy by his peers. That evening, he wrote in his letter, "Tomorrow, I'll begin reading Treasure Island. I think you'll enjoy the adventure and pirate excitement. I had some other listeners today who seemed interested in joining our story time regularly. Would you like that, having some of the neighborhood children join us?" Tommy's reply the next day was enthusiastic. Yes, please. I would love to meet some of the kids from the park. Maybe they could wave to me sometimes too. Do you think they would want to be my friends, even though I can't play outside?" Mark smiled as he read Tommy's hopeful words, knowing that children could be remarkably accepting given the chance. "Yes, I think they might." He wrote back, "Friendship takes many forms, Tommy, and sometimes it begins with simply sharing a good story." The following afternoon, 3 children from the day before returned, bringing 2 more friends with them, sitting cross-legged on the grass around Mark's bench as he began reading Treasure Island, Buddy moving among them, accepting gentle pats, all of them waving to Tommy before the story began. The boy's face pressed against his window with an expression of wonder at this unexpected turn of events. It was a small beginning, Mark thought, as he opened the book to chapter 1. But sometimes the most important journeys began with the smallest steps. What had started as a simple wave to a lonely child was growing into something neither of them could have anticipated, a connection that was gradually expanding to include others, a window that was becoming less of a barrier and more of a meeting place. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about the afternoon story sessions at Maple Street Park. Children told their parents, parents told other parents, And soon Mark's daily readings had become something of a local phenomenon, with growing. Crowds gathering to listen and wave to the boy in the window. Mark had always had a gift for storytelling honed by decades in the classroom. But there was something special about these outdoor performances with Tommy as their primary audience. He chose books with rich adventure, colorful characters, and themes of friendship and courage that resonated with children and adults alike. His expressive voice bringing the stories to life as Buddy sat faithfully beside him, occasionally punctuating dramatic moments with a perfectly timed bark for Tommy. The transformation of his window view was nothing short of miraculous. Where once he had watched the world with longing, now part of that world gathered each day specifically to include him. The children who had previously played in the park oblivious to his existence now looked up to wave, called out greetings, even held up signs of their own. Sometimes the crowd would break into spontaneous applause at the end of a chapter, causing Tommy to beam with joy at being part of something larger than his isolated room one afternoon. As Mark was concluding a particularly exciting chapter, a girl about Tommy's age with dark braids and glasses raised her hand as if in a classroom yes. Mark acknowledged her with a teacher's instinct. "Why can't Tommy come outside to listen with us?" she asked, the simple directness of children cutting to the heart of the matter. Mark glanced up at Tommy's window, knowing the boy could hear the question. Before answering, "Tommy has a special medical condition," he explained gently, "that makes it dangerous for him to be around germs that wouldn't bother most of us. His immune system, which is the part of your body that fights off sickness, doesn't work properly." The children considered this information with solemn faces. "Is he going to get better?" another child asked. Mark chose his words carefully. "Scientists are working on better treatments," he said, "and Tommy has excellent doctors. But for now, the safest place for him is inside his home, where the air is specially filtered and everything is kept very clean." Is that why he's always at the window? A boy with a red baseball cap asked, the same boy Tommy had observed and named in his notebook months. "Exactly," Mark nodded. "Tommy can see the world from his window, but can't physically join us, at least not yet. But that doesn't mean he can't be our friend, does it?" The children shook their heads in unison, several of them waving with renewed enthusiasm. To Tommy, who waved back, his face bright with emotion at being the center of such attention and understanding. "Can we do something special for him?" the girl with braids asked. She reminded Mark of many thoughtful students he'd taught over the years, the ones who instinctively looked out for others. "I bet it gets lonely in there." Mark smiled at her insightful comment. "That's a wonderful idea, Lily," he said. Reading her name embroidered on her backpack, "Does anyone have suggestions?" Ideas came quickly. After that, the children's creativity flowing freely. "Maybe we could make him cards. Maybe we could put on a play for him. Maybe we could all learn a song to sing to him. Maybe we could have a parade outside his window." Mark listened to each suggestion. With encouraging nods, impressed by the children's genuine enthusiasm, "We'll need to coordinate with Tommy's mother." He cautioned them to make sure whatever we do is safe for Tommy. "But I think these are all excellent ideas," as the group dispersed. With promises to return the next day, Mark noticed several parents approaching him, curious about the window story time that had captured their children's attention. They had questions about Tommy, about his condition, about appropriate ways to interact. With the family, "Is it really safe for the boy to have his window open?" Janet Chen asked, voicing what several parents were wondering. "Doesn't that expose him to outside air?" Mark had done his research since beginning his friendship with Tommy, prepared for such questions. Tommy's mother keeps his exposure carefully controlled. He explained the upstairs windows have special filters installed and they monitor air quality constantly. It's actually important for Tommy to have some interaction, even if it's from a distance. Social isolation can have serious effects on a child's development. The parents nodded, processing this information, some looking thoughtful, others slightly uncomfortable with the complexity of the situation. "What can we do?" To help, one father asked his son, was Lily's frequent playmate, that simple question opened a floodgate of community response over the following weeks. What had begun as Mark's solitary act of kindness evolved into a neighborhood initiative. Parents helped organize a rotation of story readers to supplement Mark's sessions, ensuring Tommy had daily entertainment. Even when Mark had other commitments, children created colorful posters and artwork to display where Tommy could see them from his window. A local bookstore donated books specifically chosen to interest a science-loving 7-year-old. Elaine watched this growing community involvement with a mixture of gratitude and caution, her protective instincts always on alert where Tommy's health was concerned, but she couldn't deny the positive changes in her son, who now rushed to his window each afternoon with an excitement that had been missing before his appetite had improved. His sleep was more restful. He talked constantly about his window friends, especially Mark and Buddy. One evening after Tommy had gone to bed, Elaine sat down to write her own letter, to mark the first direct communication between them beyond brief waves and nods. "Dear Mr. Davis," she began, then crossed it out, starting again. "Dear Mark, I wanted to thank you for what you've done for Tommy. These past 2 months, I haven't seen him this happy since before. He understood the limitations of his condition, your daily visits, and now this amazing community response have given him something I couldn't. Despite all my efforts, a sense of belonging." She continued, explaining more about Tommy's medical journey, the bone marrow transplant that had only partially succeeded, the experimental treatments they were considering, the constant balance between protection and quality of life, the exhaustion of being both nurse and mother to a child with complex medical needs. "I was hesitant at first," she admitted, "when Tommy told me about the man with the golden retriever who waved to him a mother's caution. I'm sure you understand, but I've watched how careful and respectful you've been of our boundaries, how you've educated others about Tommy's needs without making him seem like a curiosity or object of pity." Mark read her letter with mounting emotion, understanding the trust Elaine was placing in him, the precious gift of her son's friendship. Not given lightly, her final paragraph bringing tears to his eyes. "Tommy has few memories of life before his diagnosis at age 2. He doesn't know what it's like to run in the park, to make friends on a playground, to simply exist without constant vigilance against infection. What you've given him is a taste of normal childhood connection, friendship, being seen as Tommy, not just as a sick child, and for that I am profoundly grateful. Would you consider coming to our front porch sometime to meet properly? Of course, we would need to maintain distance and take precautions, but I think it's time we thanked you in person." Mark held the letter carefully as if it contained something precious, which indeed it did, the beginning of a bridge between Tommy's isolated world and the community that was finally learning to see him. The meeting on Mark's front porch was carefully orchestrated, Elaine wearing a mask and gloves, maintaining a 6-foot distance. Mark and Buddy staying at the bottom of the steps, while Elaine sat at the top. Despite these precautions, there was an immediate warmth between them, a connection forged through their shared concern for Tommy. "I can't thank you enough for what you've done," Elaine said, her eyes above her mask crinkling with a smile. "I haven't seen Tommy this engaged with the world in years." Mark waved away her thanks. "It's been my pleasure." "Truly," he replied, Buddy sitting obediently beside him, though his wagging tail betrayed his excitement at meeting a new friend. "Tommy is a remarkable boy. Your dedication to him is inspirational." They talked for nearly an hour, Elaine sharing more details about Tommy's condition, Mark telling her about his teaching career and his life with Carol, finding common ground in their dedication to children's well-being. By the time Elaine needed to leave for her shift at the hospital, a partnership had formed between them, an alliance focused on enriching Tommy's life while respecting the medical boundaries that kept him safe. What began as their front porch conversation evolved into what Mark jokingly called Operation Friendship, a more organized approach to connecting Tommy with the community, with Elaine's medical knowledge guiding the safety protocols and Mark's educational background structuring the social interactions. The first official event was Window Wave Wednesday, Mark working with several neighborhood parents to coordinate a gathering of children directly across from Tommy's window. Each child bringing a homemade sign, introducing themselves. Lily's read, "Hi Tommy, I love space." Two Jasons announced, "I'm learning chess, want to play sometime via computer?" Sophia's declared, "Your story? Time is the best part of my day." Tommy was overwhelmed with emotion at this orchestrated greeting, pressing his hands against the glass, his guest face alight with joy as he held up his own carefully prepared sign. "Thank you for being my friends," the children cheering in response before releasing a bunch of helium balloons that floated up past his window, each carrying a small note of friendship. For him to read later, Elaine had helped Tommy prepare sanitized treats in individually wrapped packages, which she brought down to distribute to the children, a way for Tommy to participate in the social exchange. Even from a distance, Mark noticed her careful attention to protocols while still creating a sense of normalcy for all involved. Afterward, Lily approached Mark with a thoughtful expression. "My mom's a computer programmer. She said she thinks maybe we could set up some kind of video chat so Tommy could talk to us directly, not just through the window. Would that be okay?" Mark looked to Elaine for guidance, who nodded enthusiastically. "That's actually a wonderful idea," she confirmed. "Tommy has special tablets that are regularly sanitized. For his medical appointments, we could certainly use that technology for social connections." The suggestion sparked a flurry of planning with Lily's mother, Angela, taking the lead on the technical aspects, coordinating with Elaine to ensure compatibility. With Tommy's existing systems, within a week, they had established what Angela called Tommy's Virtual Playground, a secure video platform where neighborhood children could interact with Tommy in real time, supervised by parents. The first session was chaotic in the way. All new ventures with excited children tend to be voices overlapping, questions flying, too many children trying to speak at once. But Tommy didn't seem to mind his face on the screen. Radiant with happiness at this new form of communication, Mark, serving as a gentle moderator, using his classroom management skills to ensure everyone had a turn to speak, show, and tell, emerged as a favorite activity, children bringing their treasured possessions close to the camera for Tommy. To see Tommy proudly displaying his collection of minerals, his model solar system, his favorite books, the virtual playground became a regular after-school activity with a rotating group of participants. Some days just 2 or 3 children, other days as many as 10, all connecting with the boy who had once been just a wistful face behind a window. Not all parents were immediately supportive of their children's involvement. Some expressed concerns about encouraging relationships that couldn't develop. "Normally, given Tommy's restrictions, I just don't know if it's healthy," one mother commented to Mark after a story session, "to have the children get attached to someone they can never really play with. It seems artificial." Mark considered her perspective before responding thoughtfully. "Friendship comes in many forms," he said, "and children are remarkably adaptable. I've seen how they've already found creative ways to include Tommy in their games through the video chats and window activities." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And there's tremendous value in teaching children empathy, acceptance of differences, and creative problem solving, which is exactly what this situation provides." Most parents came around, especially as they saw the positive effects on their own children, who developed a protective fondness for Tommy and a greater awareness of those with different abilities and challenges. Lily, in particular, had become Tommy's most dedicated friend, connecting with him almost daily, sharing her love of astronomy, bringing books to show him through the window, organizing the other children for special Tommy-centered activities. Through it all, Mark remained the cornerstone of Operation Friendship, his daily story sessions. Continuing regardless of weather, his steady presence, a reassurance to Tommy that he was not forgotten. His gentle guidance helping the neighborhood children understand Tommy's situation without fear or pity. Buddy became a neighborhood celebrity. In his own right, the Golden Retriever's friendly demeanor and seemingly intuitive understanding of his role in Tommy's life, making him a favorite among all the children. One unexpected development was the formation of a parent support group initiated by Angela Lily's mother and quickly joined by other neighborhood parents. The group focused on learning more about immunodeficiency disorders, proper sanitization techniques, and ways to make their community more inclusive for children with medical restrictions. Elaine was invited to speak at their first formal meeting, her expertise as both a nurse and Tommy's mother providing valuable insights. "Oh, are you holding up with all this attention?" Mark asked Elaine during one of their now regular front porch conversations. "It's not too overwhelming for Tommy, is it?" Elaine shook her head, watching through the window as Tommy engaged in an animated video chat with Lily and two other children, a chess game in progress between them. "I worried about that initially," she admitted. "But he's thriving with these connections. His doctors have even noticed improvements in some of his physical markers." She turned to Mark with tears in her eyes. "You've given us both a community, Mark, something I'd almost given up hope of finding." Mark felt a lump in his throat at her words, remembering his own isolation after Carol's death. The empty days before he'd noticed Tommy, how reaching out to help another had ultimately helped him too. Operation Friendship had indeed transformed Tommy's life, but it had changed all of them in ways none could have anticipated when a retired teacher and his golden retriever first waved to a lonely boy in a window. Summer arrived, bringing longer days and the freedom of school vacation for the neighborhood children. Tommy's virtual playground evolved from occasional video chats to daily scheduled activities as Mark and Angela worked together to create more structured opportunities for interaction with the support of other parents and Elaine's careful oversight of health protocols. "Why not create a virtual summer camp?" Mark suggested during one of the parent planning meetings he'd been thinking about how to maintain the children's interest and provide Tommy with more varied experiences, something more than just casual conversation or games. We could have themed days, special guests, demonstrations, all the things children typically enjoy at summer programs, but adapted for Tommy's participation. The idea caught fire with parents, many volunteering their skills and connections to create a rich program. Angela set up a more sophisticated platform, allowing for larger groups and better visibility. Tommy's tablet positioned on a special stand at his window so he could see and be seen by the gathered children in the park. The distance between them bridged by technology and creativity. Magic Monday science, Tuesday wildlife, Wednesday theatrical. Thursday and Fun Friday became the weekly structure, with Mark serving as the primary facilitator, drawing on his years of educational experience to keep activities engaging and inclusive. Each day brought new adventures to Tommy's window and new participants to the growing community project on Science Tuesdays. Jason's father, a chemistry professor, performed spectacular experiments in the park that produced colorful smoke, giant foam eruptions, and other visual phenomena that Tommy could appreciate fully from his window, the professor explaining scientific principles at a level the children could understand, encouraging them to ask questions with Tommy's inquiries. Coming through the speaker system, Angela had rigged up. "I never thought I'd be teaching chemistry to a drive-in audience," the professor joked, gesturing to the children seated on picnic blankets and Tommy watching from above like a royal box at the theater. Wildlife Wednesdays featured visits from the local nature center, staff bringing carefully selected animals for the children to see, Mark making sure each creature was positioned so Tommy had a clear view from his window. The park becoming a temporary zoo with appearances by owls, turtles, non-venomous snakes, and, once a baby deer being rehabilitated after losing its mother, "Tommy can see better than we can," Lily observed during one such presentation, pointing out how his elevated position gave him an excellent vantage point. That's why he notices so much about the neighborhood. Theatrical Thursdays became elaborate affairs with the children performing short plays directed by Sophia's mother, a community theater actress. the productions growing more ambitious each week with costumes, props, and scripts that always included a special role for Tommy delivered through his video connection, his face projected onto a large screen so he could participate in scenes with the other children. Despite the physical separation, Mark watched with pride as the initially shy boy grew more confident in these performances, finding his voice literally and figuratively through the creative opportunities the virtual summer camp provided. It was during a particularly energetic Friday dance party led by a local ballet instructor that Mark noticed Tommy seemed unusually tired, his movement slower, his enthusiasm dimmed initially. He attributed it to the summer heat or perhaps the excitement of the week's activities. But when Tommy disappeared from the screen earlier than usual, Mark felt a twinge of concern. Is everything okay with Tommy? He asked Elaine during their next porch meeting. She looked more tired than usual, the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced than he had seen before. Elaine sighed her shoulders. Slumping slightly, he's having a flare-up, she explained. We've been managing it, but his lab values aren't where they should be. The doctors are monitoring him closely. She attempted a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He wouldn't dream of missing any activities, though. He lives for these connections now. Mark felt a wave of concern tempered with determination. Is there anything we can do to make things easier for both of you? He asked. Should we scale back some activities? Elaine considered this. Actually, having the structured activities helps keep his spirits up, which is crucial right now, she admitted. Though maybe we could adjust some of the more energetic ones to allow him to participate while conserving his energy. She hesitated before adding, his doctor has suggested we might need to consider another round of treatments at the university hospital, depending on his next set of labs. Mark nodded, understanding the implications. This might mean a temporary relocation for Tommy and Elaine, potentially disrupting the community connections they'd worked so hard to establish. Please keep me informed, he said. We'll adapt whatever we need to support you both. When Mark shared this update with the core group of parents involved. In the virtual summer camp, they immediately began brainstorming ways to make their activities more accessible for Tommy on his low-energy days and transportable. Should he need to go to the university hospital 2 hours away, we could record all the activities Angela suggested so he could watch them when he's feeling up to it, even if he can't participate live, and we could create care packages. Lily's mother added things to keep him entertained during treatments, books, games, activities. Mark was touched by the community's ready response to Tommy's needs, remembering how just months ago the boy had been virtually invisible to the neighborhood. Now he was at the center of their concern, their collective care, extending beyond mere entertainment. To genuine support, the virtual summer camp continued with subtle adjustments, more seated activities, shorter segments, opportunities for Tommy to observe rather than actively participate when his energy was low, but always with his window open to the world, his tablet connecting him to friends who now looked for him, automatically checking his window when they passed the house, waving even when no formal activity was planned. Lily, in particular, seemed attuned to Tommy's changing energy levels, sometimes suggesting quieter activities when she noticed him tiring the two children, developing a special friendship. Despite never having been in the same room, her patient explanations of the outside world matched by his enthusiastic sharing of his extensive knowledge of space and science. They complemented each other in ways that transcended their physical separation. Mark observed their growing bond with particular interest, seeing in Lily the same compassionate spirit that had made his late wife Carol such a beloved kindergarten teacher, the girl's natural empathy drawing out Tommy's personality in ways that even his mother found remarkable. He's different with Lily, Elaine commented one evening as they watched the two children engrossed in a virtual chess match. She brings out a confidence in him I don't see otherwise. It's like he forgets his limitations when they're together. Mark nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Some friendships have that quality, he said. They help us become more fully ourselves regardless of circumstances. The summer progressed with this delicate balance of adaptation and continuation, the virtual classroom evolving to meet Tommy's changing energy levels while maintaining the connections that had become vital to him, the community learning valuable lessons about flexibility and inclusion that went far beyond their initial goal of simply acknowledging a lonely boy at a window. Mark was reviewing the upcoming week's virtual camp activities when Lily approached him, her expression serious, in the way that children get when they're contemplating something important. Buddy immediately moving to greet her with a gentle nudge. Of his nose, Mr. Davis. She began with unusual formality. Did you know? Tommy's birthday is next Saturday. Mark hadn't known this significant detail, feeling a momentary pang. That such important information had escaped his attention? No, I didn't. Lily, thank you for telling me, he replied. How did you find out, Lily? Beamed with the satisfaction of sharing valuable knowledge, he told me. During chess. Yesterday, he said, he doesn't usually do much for birthdays, just cake with his mom and maybe his grandma. On video chat, her face grew solemn that seemed sad. For a birthday, Mark nodded in agreement. It does indeed, he said already. Considering possibilities, what do you think we should do about it? Lily's eyes widened at being consulted, like an equal. Well, she said thoughtfully, we can't have a regular party with everyone inside and presents and stuff. Her brow furrowed with concentration, but maybe we could do something special. Outside his window, something he could see. That's an excellent starting point. Mark encouraged. What kind of special something were you thinking that afternoon? Mark convened an impromptu meeting of what had become known as Tommy's team, the core group of parents and children most involved in the virtual summer camp. The discussion centered around creating a meaningful birthday celebration that would work within Tommy's medical restrictions. We could decorate the park Jason suggested so he can see it from his window, balloons and streamers. And a big sign, Sophia added excitedly. What about presents? Lily's mother asked, practical as always. How would that work with the sanitization requirements? Elaine, who had joined the meeting during her break from hospital duties, explained the protocols. We have a UV sanitizing system at home for smaller items, she said. Anything that can fit in the chamber can be sterilized within a few hours. For Tommy to handle safely larger items would need to be enjoyed visually or through plastic barriers. The planning took on a life of its own, with different families volunteering for various aspects of the celebration. Jason's father would handle sound equipment so everyone could sing happy birthday and Tommy could hear it clearly. Sophia's mother would coordinate decorations. Lily's parents would create a special video compilation of birthday messages from everyone. Angela would set up a large outdoor screen for a movie night feature that Tommy could watch simultaneously from his window. Mark's contribution would be the centerpiece of the celebration, a handmade puppet theater constructed in his garage. With Buddy watching curiously as he sawed and painted during the show, Mark would perform a specially written puppet play, telling the story of a brave space explorer, clearly based on Tommy, who discovered new worlds from his spaceship observation deck. The parallel to Tommy's window. Obvious but thoughtfully presented, the days leading up to Tommy's birthday were filled with secret preparations. Children working on handmade cards and small gifts that could be sanitized. Parents coordinating timing and logistics to ensure everything would unfold smoothly. Elaine kept Tommy occupied during key planning moments, arranging for his grandmother to have extended video calls with him when neighborhood activity might give away the surprise. Tommy's health continued to fluctuate, his good days allowing full participation in virtual camp activities, his harder days requiring more rest and observation. Rather than interaction, Mark watched carefully for signs of fatigue, always ready to adjust activities on the fly. Noticing that Tommy rarely complained even when he was clearly struggling, he doesn't want to miss anything. Elaine explained when Mark expressed concern. Tommy's afraid if he admits he's feeling unwell, we'll cancel activities. It's the first time he's had this kind of social connection, and he's holding on to it with everything he has. The morning of Tommy's birthday, arrived with perfect weather, warm sunshine, and a gentle breeze, ideal for the outdoor celebration. Mark arrived early to help set up the puppet theater in the park, directly across from Tommy's window, the neighborhood gradually filling with decorations as families arrived with balloons, streamers, and a huge hand-painted banner reading, "Happy birthday, Tommy. We see you. We love you." The simple affirmation bringing tears to Elaine's eyes when she slipped outside briefly to view the preparations by mid-afternoon. Everything was ready. The park transformed into a festive space filled with colors and excitement, children barely containing their anticipation as they waited for Tommy to appear at his window, on cue. Lily called Tommy's tablet, initiating the video connection that would allow him to hear everything clearly. Surprised, the gathered community shouted as Tommy's face appeared in his window, his expression transforming from curiosity to astonishment to pure joy. As he took in the decorated park, the crowd of people all there specifically for him, the banner with its heartfelt message. The words seemed to fail him for a moment, his eyes wide behind his glasses. "Thank you." He finally managed his voice coming through the speaker's Angela headset. Up his smile so bright, it seemed to illuminate his entire window. The celebration unfolded with a carefully choreographed sequence. First, the singing of Happy Birthday with Mark leading, and everyone joining in, including several neighbors who had been drawn by the commotion. Then the puppet show, which had Tommy laughing and clapping from his window seat, especially when a golden retriever puppet, clearly inspired by Buddy, made a surprise appearance to help the space explorer on his mission next. Came the virtual birthday card presentation, each child holding their handmade creation up to the camera mounted near Tommy's window so he could see the details before they were collected for sanitizing and delivery. The cards ranging from carefully drawn rocket ships to glitter-covered stars to heartfelt messages of friendship throughout it all. Tommy remained at his window, sometimes standing, sometimes sitting, but always engaged, his face reflecting every emotion, from surprise to gratitude to overwhelming happiness. Elaine, standing just behind him, occasionally visible her own expression, a mixture of joy and disbelief at the community's extraordinary efforts for her son. The gifts were presented on a special table, each one tagged with the giver's name to be sanitized and brought to Tommy. Later books, astronomy guides, model kits, craft projects, all chosen with his interests in mind. But the most meaningful gift came from Lily, a carefully constructed constellation viewer she and her father had made from a shoebox and LED lights when plugged in. It projected the stars of the summer sky onto Tommy's ceiling so he could stargaze indoors. "It's like having the outside inside," she explained through the video connection. "So even when you can't look out the window, you can still see something beautiful." As evening approached, the celebration continued with the promised movie projected on a large outdoor screen, positioned so Tommy could see it clearly from his window. The children, seated on blankets in the park, sharing the experience with him. Despite the physical separation, pizza delivered to both the park and to Tommy's house, sanitized appropriately so he could enjoy the same meal as his friends. Mark sat on his usual bench, Buddy beside him, watching not the movie, but Tommy's illuminated window, the boy's profile visible as he watched the screen, occasionally turning to say something to his mother or respond to a message from one of the children on his tablet. The simple joy of shared experience bridging the necessary distance between them. "This is better than I imagined," Lily said quietly, taking a seat next to Mark. "Look how happy he is." Mark nodded, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You know this was all possible because you remembered his birthday." He told her sometimes the most important thing we can do for someone is simply to notice what matters to them. As the movie ended and families began gathering their belongings, Mark caught Elaine's eye through the window, giving her a thumbs up, which she returned with a grateful smile. Tommy waving enthusiastically to everyone before finally stepping away from his window, clearly exhausted, but glowing with happiness. The birthday celebration had been more Than just a party, it had been a statement of community, a declaration that Tommy mattered, that his life was worth celebrating, that his window was not a barrier, but a connection point where love and friendship could flow freely. The first sign that Tommy's birthday celebration had attracted attention beyond the neighborhood came 3 days later when a reporter and photographer from the local newspaper appeared at the park. During afternoon story time, the journalist, introducing herself to Mark as Catherine Wong from the Oakdale Gazette, "I heard about what you're doing here." She explained, her gaze moving toward Tommy's window, where the boy was visible, watching the interaction with curious eyes, the community rallying around. A child with a rare immune disorder. It's exactly the kind of uplifting story our readers need right now. Mark felt a protective instinct rise within him, acutely aware of Tommy observing them and of Elaine's careful guardianship of her son's privacy. "We're just neighbors being neighborly," he said modestly. "Nothing particularly newsworthy." The reporter smiled undeterred. "From what I understand, you've created an entire virtual summer program for this child, inspired the neighborhood to learn about immunodeficiency disorders, and essentially transformed a community's understanding of inclusion." She persisted. "That seems pretty newsworthy to me, especially with everything else in the headlines these days." Before Mark could respond, Lily approached. The conversation, her natural confidence evident as she addressed the reporter. "Tommy isn't just a story," she said firmly. "He's our friend. We don't want him to feel like he's some kind of curiosity." Catherine's expression softened at the child's protective stance. "I understand completely," she assured them. "That's why I'd like to talk to all of you to make sure the story is told respectfully. Would it be possible to speak with Tommy's mother as well?" Mark exchanged glances with Lily, both recognizing the potential benefits and risks of public attention. "I'll check with Elaine," he said. "That's not my decision to make." That evening, a small group gathered on Elaine's front porch at a safe distance to discuss the reporter's interest. Elaine looking tired after her hospital shift, but engaged in the conversation, Angela and Lily's parents joining Mark to provide perspective. "I'm naturally cautious about Tommy's privacy," Elaine admitted. "He's already had to deal with so much in his young life. I don't want him to be defined by his medical condition or viewed as an object of pity. I completely understand." Mark assured her. "We can simply decline the interview." Elaine shook her head. "Actually, I've been thinking about it," she said. Surprising them, Tommy's doctor at the university hospital mentioned that raising awareness about CKD could potentially help other families access resources earlier. She paused, and honestly, seeing how this community has rallied around us might inspire others to do the same for isolated children in their neighborhoods. The group discussed parameters for the potential story, establishing clear boundaries about Tommy's medical details, emphasizing the community's response rather than Tommy's condition, focusing on the creative solutions rather than limitations. Elaine would have final approval on any photos of Tommy and the right to review the article. Before publication, with these guidelines established, Catherine was invited to observe the virtual summer camp activities, conducting brief interviews with various participants, Mark providing the historical context of how it all began with a simple wave to a boy in a window, Elaine sharing selective information about Tommy's journey and the impact of community inclusion on his well-being. Tommy himself was thrilled at the idea of being in the newspaper, his natural enthusiasm shining through during his carefully supervised video interview with Catherine. "Is it okay if I mention the constellation viewer Lily made me?" he asked. "And Mr. Mark's puppet show and Buddy's tricks?" Catherine laughed, assuring him those were exactly the kinds of details that would make the story special. Her gentle approach and genuine interest putting everyone at ease. As she gathered material, the article appeared the following Sunday on the front page of the local section, with the headline, "Window to the World." Community creates virtual summer camp for immunocompromised child. The story thoughtfully written, focusing on the neighborhood's innovative approach to inclusion, with quotes from Tommy, Elaine, Mark, and several of the children, accompanied by photos of the park activities and a distant shot of Tommy at his window, the golden glow of sunset illuminating. His smiling face, what happened next, took everyone by surprise. The story was picked up by regional news outlets, then featured on a popular morning show's segment about community heroes. Suddenly, the Quiet Neighborhood Initiative was receiving attention from across the state, then beyond Elaine's email inbox, filling with messages from other families with immunocompromised children, medical professionals wanting to learn more about their virtual program community, organizers seeking advice on similar initiatives. It's overwhelming, Elaine confessed to Mark as they sorted through the responses together, Tommy alternating between excitement and shyness at the attention. "I never expected this kind of reaction," neither did I, Mark admitted. "But perhaps we should have the story resonates, because it's about seeing someone who was previously invisible, about making a difference through simple human connection. That's something everyone understands." The most meaningful responses came from other parents, of children with immune disorders, many sharing heartbreaking stories of isolation and loneliness, photographs of their own children at windows, watching the world from a distance, several asking if Tommy might be willing to connect with their children virtually to share experiences and friendship. Tommy was immediately enthusiastic about this possibility. "Mom, can I please?" He begged, his natural empathy extending to these unknown children whose experiences mirrored his own. "I could show them my Constellation viewer and introduce them to Lily and everyone with careful screening and parental supervision." These connections began to form a network of window children, as Tommy called them, sharing their stories, challenges, and coping strategies. Across distances, Tommy's confidence growing as he found himself in the unexpected role of mentor, showing newer diagnoses the possibilities for connection. Despite isolation, local businesses began reaching out, offering support for the virtual summer. Camp, the bookstore, donating more reading materials, the hardware store providing materials for Mark's projects, the ice cream shop sending specially packaged treats that could be sanitized for Tommy. The neighborhood initiative evolving into something larger and more structured than anyone had initially imagined. Not all the attention was positive. However, as the story spread, some commenters questioned whether such extensive accommodation for one child was reasonable, whether the resources might be better directed elsewhere, whether Tommy's parents had made the right medical choices in the first place. Elaine was hurt by these perspectives, though she tried not to show it. Mark and the other parents forming a protective barrier, filtering comments and focusing on the overwhelmingly positive response the media attention had generated. They were particularly careful about Tommy's exposure to public reaction, wanting him to experience only the supportive aspects of their newfound visibility. "Doesn't need to know about the negative comments," Mark said firmly during a parent meeting. "To discuss the situation, he's a child who deserves to feel celebrated, not debated." The group unanimously agreed, establishing guidelines for managing the increased attention, filtering inquiries, coordinating responses, and maintaining the original purpose of their efforts: Tommy's well-being and inclusion within appropriate medical boundaries. The media spotlight would eventually move on. They knew, but the connections they'd built would remain as the summer progressed. Tommy's health continued to fluctuate. Good days, where he participated fully in activities, interspersed with harder days, when he watched more quietly from his window, Elaine monitoring his condition. With increasing concern, though, trying to maintain normalcy for both their sakes. Mark noticed the subtle signs of her worry, the extra medical equipment appearing in Tommy's room, glimpsed through the window the more frequent visits from home health nurses, Tommy's occasional absence from scheduled activities, the unspoken reality of his condition hovering beneath the surface of their summer activities. A reminder that for all their creative solutions, Tommy's medical journey remained complex and uncertain. Through it all, the window remained their connection point, the glass both barrier and bridge, the community gathering below, Tommy observing from above their shared activities, transcending the physical separation that necessity imposed. The media attention unexpected, but ultimately serving to strengthen rather than disrupt the bonds they'd formed across that transparent divide. August brought increasing heat and humidity that made outdoor activities challenging the virtual summer camp. Adapting once again with morning sessions to avoid the worst of the day's temperatures and more indoor activities streamed to Tommy's tablet. The media attention had begun to fade as expected, but had left behind a network of connections that continued to grow and strengthen in unexpected ways. The most significant development was the formation of the Window Friends Network, a virtual support group linking families with immunocompromised children across the country, inspired by Tommy's story and facilitated by Angela's technical expertise and Elaine's medical knowledge. The weekly video meetings became a lifeline for previously isolated families, sharing resources, medical information, and, most importantly, the emotional support of others who truly understood their challenges. Tommy flourished in this new, expanded community, no longer the only child watching life from behind. Glass finding kinship with others who shared his experience, yet each bringing unique perspectives and interests that broadened his world. Jacob from Minnesota taught Tommy chess strategies. Sarah from Florida shared her extensive knowledge of marine biology. Michael from Oregon introduced him to coding with specially designed remote lessons. "It's like he's found his tribe," Elaine remarked to Mark as they watched Tommy engaged in animated conversation with his new friends, his face alight with the joy of true connection. "He's never had peers who understand what it's like to live this way." Mark nodded, understanding the profound importance of this development for both Tommy and Elaine. "Isolation is doubly difficult when you feel you're the only one," he said. Carol used to say that about children with learning differences, they often suffered more from feeling alone in their struggles than from the challenges themselves. The neighborhood initiative continued as well, evolving into what was now officially called the Window Wave Project, with regular activities scheduled around Tommy's window. Mark still leading daily story time, but now joined by a rotating cast of volunteer readers, community members stopping by to share their talents or interests with Tommy, and by extension, with the other neighborhood children who continued to participate. Maple Street Park had become the epicenter of an unusual community, revival neighbors who had previously only exchanged casual greetings now collaborated on projects. Children who might never have played together, forming friendships through their shared connection to Tommy. Adults discovering unexpected common ground as they worked toward inclusive solutions. The invisible barriers between houses and families dissolving as surely as the barrier of Tommy's window had become permeable through creativity and care. The most dedicated participant remained Lily, her friendship with Tommy deepening despite, or perhaps because, of the challenges they faced in communicating. Her daily visits to his window becoming as much a part of her routine as breakfast or brushing teeth. Her understanding of his condition growing more sophisticated as she researched immunodeficiency disorders, with the seriousness of purpose typically seen in much older students. Mr. Davis. Lily approached Mark one afternoon after story time, clutching a library book about immune systems. "I've been reading about Tommy's condition, and I learned something interesting." Mark smiled at her earnestness. "What's that?" "Lily, some kids with SID can get better with bone marrow transplants," she explained, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Tommy had one when he was little, but his mom says it was only partially successful because they didn't find a perfect match." She looked up at Mark with sudden intensity. What if someone here could be a better match for Tommy? Mark was touched by her concern, but careful not to encourage false hopes. "That's a very thoughtful idea, Lily, but finding matching donors is incredibly complicated. It involves specific genetic factors, not just blood type." Lily wasn't deterred by this explanation. "But what if we could find someone?" she persisted. "My mom says sometimes communities do donor drives to help people with blood cancers Maybe we could do something like that for Tommy. Mark promised to discuss the idea with Elaine, recognizing that Lily's suggestion, while coming from a place of love, needed to be approached with sensitivity. Given the complex medical realities of Tommy's condition and the potential for raising expectations that might not be fulfilled, to his surprise, Elaine was cautiously receptive to the concept when he brought it up during their next porch conversation. "We've been discussing additional treatment options with Tommy's specialists," she explained, including another transplant, "if we could find a better donor match." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. The challenge has always been finding that match. Tommy's tissue type is uncommon, which is why his father's donation was only partially compatible. Mark processed this information carefully. "So Lily's idea isn't completely impractical," he said. Elaine smiled faintly. "It's actually remarkably insightful for a 7-year-old. She admitted, "We've been on the National Registry since Tommy's diagnosis. But expanding the pool of potential donors could only help, not just for Tommy, but for others waiting for matches." What evolved from this conversation was the Sunshine for SID Awareness Campaign, a community-led initiative to educate people about severe combined immunodeficiency disorder and encourage registration with the National Bone Marrow Donor Registry. Lily and her mother taking leading roles in organizing information sessions, both in person and virtual, with medical professionals, providing guidance on the process and importance of diverse donor registration. The campaign launched with a virtual panel discussion featuring Tommy's doctor from the University Hospital, Elaine sharing her family's journey, and representatives from the National Registry explaining the simple cheek swab process required for initial testing. The event streamed live to Tommy's window and to the growing network of window friends across the country, many of whom joined in promoting the campaign in their own communities. Watching from his window, Tommy felt a complex mixture of emotions, hope, mingled with the pragmatic caution he'd developed. Through years of medical ups and downs, the possibility of improvement balanced against the reality of his current limitations, gratitude for the community's efforts, regardless of whether they ultimately benefited him personally. "I might not get better," he told Mark candidly during one of their video chats. "But maybe this will help other kids like me. That's important too." Mark was struck once again by Tommy's maturity and perspective. "That's very wise." He said, "Sometimes the most meaningful actions are those that help others, even if we don't see the direct benefit ourselves." As the awareness campaign gained momentum, something unexpected began to happen. Local businesses displayed Sunshine for SID posters in their windows. Mirroring Tommy's own window presence, community members changed their social media profile pictures to the campaign's Sunshine logo. Local news picked up the story again, highlighting the educational aspects of the initiative. The window that had once isolated Tommy becoming a symbol of connection, awareness, and possibility. Perhaps the most meaningful development came when the school district superintendent approached Mark about incorporating the Window Wave project into the upcoming school year's curriculum, using Tommy's story as a springboard for teaching students about medical diversity, inclusion, and creative problem solving. A dedicated teacher would coordinate with Tommy's homeschool program, allowing for collaborative projects and shared learning experiences. "We've been watching what your neighborhood has accomplished," Dr. Barrett told Mark. "It's a powerful model for educational inclusion that addresses not just academic needs, but social and emotional ones as well. We'd like to formalize and expand it with your guidance." As summer began to wane, the virtual camp activities gradually shifted toward preparation for this new integrated educational approach. Angela working with the school's technology team to ensure seamless connection. Tommy's excitement growing as he contemplated being part of a classroom experience. Even if, through a screen, the neighborhood children practicing the routines they would maintain. Once school resumed, ensuring Tommy remained included. Marks watched these developments with a sense of wonder, remembering that first rainy day when he'd noticed a lonely child at a window, how that simple moment of seeing truly, seeing another person, had catalyzed changes none of them could have imagined. The ripples of that connection continuing to spread outward, touching lives far beyond their small community. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning as Mark was having breakfast with Buddy, a message from Dr. Kelsey, Tommy's specialist at the University Hospital, requesting a video call at Mark's earliest convenience, concerned that something might be wrong. With Tommy's health, Mark responded immediately, suggesting a time later that morning. To his surprise, when the call connected, Dr. Kelsey's expression was cautiously optimistic, not bearing the grave news Mark had feared. "Mr. Davis, thank you for making time," the doctor began. "I've been following the remarkable community initiative you've helped create for Tommy, and I wanted to discuss a possibility with you before presenting it to Elaine." And Tommy, Mark listened with growing excitement as Dr. Kelsey outlined a proposal: the annual Fall Festival for pediatric patients at the University Hospital. Typically, a closed event for current patients and their families might this year include a special accommodation for Tommy, allowing him limited outdoors participation with proper precautions. We've been working with a company that specializes in protective isolation equipment. Dr. Kelsey explained they've developed a portable containment suit with HEPA filtration that would allow Tommy approximately 2 hours of supervised outdoor exposure with minimal risk. The Fall Festival would be an ideal controlled environment to test this technology with medical staff present. Mark thought immediately of how meaningful this opportunity would be for Tommy, whose entire life had been spent observing rather than participating in such events. But he was also keenly aware of the emotional complexities involved, the hope such an opportunity would raise the devastation. If it proved impossible, I'd need to see the full safety protocols, he said cautiously. And of course, this would ultimately be Elaine's decision. Of course. Dr. Kelsey agreed. We've prepared comprehensive documentation on the system's testing and safety features. My team would handle all medical aspects, but we were hoping for your help with the community component specifically. The transport parade. Mark raised an eyebrow questioningly. The suit provides protection, but is somewhat conspicuous, Dr. Kelsey explained. We thought if Tommy's first public outing could be framed as a celebration, a parade of sorts from his home to the transport vehicle, it might make the experience less medical and more joyful for him. That's where your neighborhood connections could be invaluable. Idea took root in Mark's imagination immediately, the possibility of Tommy experiencing even a taste of the outside world, a carefully controlled adventure beyond his window, a momentous step that the community could help make magical rather than merely medical. After the call ended, Mark contacted Elaine, sharing Dr. Kelsey's proposal with the careful balance of enthusiasm and restraint the situation required. Watching as she processed the information, her expression shifting from surprise to cautious hope to the protective concern that was second nature to her after years of safeguarding her son's fragile health. It sounds remarkable, she said finally, but also terrifying. She twisted her hands together in her lap. 7 years of keeping him safe inside, and suddenly he could just walk outside in this special suit. She shook her head. I need to see all the research, all the safety data, talk to other families who might have used this technology. Mark nodded, understanding completely. Of course, he assured her, I wouldn't expect anything less. This isn't a decision to be made lightly. Over the following weeks, the possibility transformed into a plan. As Elaine reviewed extensive documentation, consulted with multiple specialists, and ultimately made the decision to proceed, the University Hospital coordinating medical details, while Mark orchestrated the community component of what was now being called Tommy's Special Doll. The preparation was meticulous on all fronts. The medical team conducting multiple tests of the isolation suit, Elaine receiving training on its operation and emergency protocols, the hospital arranging for a specially equipped transport vehicle, the neighborhood planning a celebration that would make Tommy's first steps outside his home in 7 years a joyful rather than clinical experience. Mark was particularly concerned about managing Tommy's expectations, working closely with Elaine to ensure the boy understood both the possibilities and limitations of the day he would be able to attend the fall festival, observe activities up close, experience outdoor sensations, but would still need to maintain distance from others, remain in the protective suit for the entire outing, and return home if any equipment issues arose. "I understand," Tommy said when they explained these parameters to him, his maturity. Once again belying his 7 years, "I'm just excited to feel real sunshine, not through glass Lily as expected." Threw herself wholeheartedly into the preparations, organizing her classmates to create decorations for the parade. Root enlisting the school band to provide music, recruiting children to serve as honor guard for Tommy's journey from front door to vehicle her natural leadership. Abilities flourishing with purpose, the entire neighborhood became involved in transforming the short walk from Tommy's house to the waiting transport into a meaningful experience. Janet Chen's garden club, creating flower arrangements along the path, the local scout troop constructing a special arch for Tommy to walk through, Sophia's mother, organizing a brief theatrical performance at the halfway point, Jason's father designing a safe confetti cannon that would shower biodegradable paper. Without contamination risks, the day approached. Mark noticed Tommy spending more time at his window, watching the mysterious preparations. With growing curiosity, Elaine reported his excitement building to nearly uncontainable levels, yet tinged with the anxiety of venturing into the unknown world. He had only observed, "What if I don't like it outside?" Tommy had asked her the night before. The big day, his voice small in the darkness. "What if it's too much?" Elaine had held him close, assuring him that his feelings, whatever they might be, were valid, that he could return home at any point, that the experience was his to define, that regardless of outcome, he was brave for trying something so new. The morning of Tommy's special day dawned. Clear and mild, perfect fall weather with gentle sunshine and a light breeze. The medical team arrived early to prepare Tommy for his journey, setting up the isolation suit with its clear helmet and built-in filtration system, carefully guiding him through each step of the process, Mark watching from a respectful distance as the boy was transformed into something resembling a small astronaut. His space obsession making this comparison particularly apt, ready for liftoff. Tommy joked, his voice slightly muffled by the helmet, but his excitement unmistakable. At precisely 10 o'clock, the front door of the Blue House opened for the first time to allow Tommy's exit rather than someone else's entrance, a moment of such significance that several observers, including Mark, found themselves blinking back tears as the small figure in the protective suit appeared on the threshold, hesitating briefly before taking his first step onto the porch. The neighborhood erupted in gentle applause as Tommy emerged, the school band playing a triumphant march, children waving handmade signs, adults smiling encouragement, Lily standing at the front of the honor guard, her face reflecting the magnitude of the moment, the sun catching the clear material of Tommy's helmet, creating a momentary halo effect around his astonished face. Mark watched as Tommy paused on the front step, his gloved hand gripping the railing, his expression visible through the clear face shield, a complex mixture of wonder, fear, excitement, and disbelief, the sensory experience of outside overwhelming. After years of climate-controlled isolation, the sounds, smells, sights, and sensations unfiltered by glass or screen, Tommy looked up at the actual sky, feeling actual sunlight on his face through the protective visor, his mouth forming a perfect O of amazement, before breaking into the widest smile Mark had ever seen on the boy's face, a smile of pure joy that communicated more powerfully than words ever could the significance of this moment. Slowly, carefully, Tommy descended the steps, taking each one with deliberate concentration, the medical team hovering nearby ready to assist if needed, but allowing him this achievement on his own terms, the parade route stretching before him decorated with balloons, streamers, and welcoming faces. The journey of 15 feet from door to sidewalk representing a monumental crossing of boundaries. For a child who had lived his life behind Glassmark, fell into step beside Buddy as Tommy reached the sidewalk, the golden retriever, seeming to understand the importance of staying close, but not too close. His gentle presence, a reassuring constant, as Tommy experienced his first true outdoor adventure, the parade beginning its slow progress. Toward the waiting vehicle, each step of victory, each moment a memory being formed, each breath of filtered outside air, a gift watching Tommy's careful progress. Mark thought about windows, how they could both connect and separate, how sometimes the most important view wasn't what you could see through the glass, but what the person on the other side could see in you. Tommy had been visible all along, but it had taken someone truly noticing him to transform that visibility into connection. The simple act of recognition creating ripples that had ultimately led to this extraordinary day. 6 months after Tommy's special day, the Blue House on Maple Street had undergone subtle but significant changes. The most noticeable being the small wooden ramp that now led to the front door, making it easier for Tommy to navigate entries and exits in his protective suit, which had become a more regular part of his life, though still used with careful medical supervision. The window that had been his primary connection to the world remained important but was no longer his only portal. To the outside, the Fall Festival had been a transformative experience for Tommy. The 2 hours he spent at the University Hospital event, carefully monitored by medical staff, but filled with new sensations, experiences, and direct interactions, albeit through his protective equipment. Elaine had watched with a mixture of terror and joy as her son experienced simple pleasures most parents took for granted, feeling grass beneath his feet, even through special boots, seeing trees up close then from a distance, experiencing the texture of different surfaces as he walked among the festival activities. The most emotional moment for everyone had been Tommy's first meeting with Mark and Buddy, without glass between them, the retired teacher, maintaining appropriate distance, but finally able to speak directly to the boy whose life he had helped transform. Buddy, sitting obediently nearby, clearly recognizing Tommy, despite the unusual protective gear, his tail wagging gently as the boy spoke to him. "I've waited so long to meet you for real," Tommy had said, his voice muffled by the helmet, but his joy unmistakable. "You're the first person, besides Mom, who ever really saw me." Mark had been unable to speak for a moment, overcome by emotion. The simple truth of Tommy's statement hitting him with unexpected force. It had been such a small thing really, that first wave, that moment of acknowledgement, yet it had catalyzed changes. None of them could have anticipated the success of this initial outing had led to carefully expanded opportunities for Tommy, always with strict medical protocols and time limitations, but each representing a precious taste of the world beyond his window, a brief walk in the park, a visit to the empty school. Building on a weekend to see the classroom he would connect with virtually during the school year, a special after-hours tour of the planetarium that had been sanitized specifically for his visit. These adventures, while transformative, had physical costs, Tommy typically needing several days of rest and careful monitoring after each excursion. The emotional benefits, however, were deemed worth the trade-off by both medical professionals and Elaine, who observed her son's growing confidence and engagement with life. Dr. Kelsey believes the positive psychological impact is actually boosting his immune function, Elaine explained to Mark during one of their regular porch conversations, where once they had maintained 6 feet of separation, they now sat more comfortably, both having adapted to the rhythms of necessary precaution without awkwardness. His latest blood work showed some improvements. Nothing dramatic, but moving in the right direction. The most significant medical development had come in January when the Sunshine for His Side campaign resulted in an unexpected potential donor match, not for Tommy himself, but for Michael, one of his window friends in Oregon, the 10-year-old boy's transplant scheduled for spring. With cautious optimism from his medical team, it wasn't what we expected when we started the campaign, Lily had remarked with wisdom beyond her years. But it's still something wonderful. Tommy had taken this news with characteristic maturity. I'm really happy for her. Michael, he told Mark during one of their virtual chess games, maybe someday they'll find a match for me too. But even if they don't, I have so much more than I used to have. What Tommy had now extended far beyond medical possibilities, the Window Wave project having evolved into a structured program that connected him not just with his immediate neighborhood, but with his school and the wider community. The initial virtual classroom experiment proving so successful that the school district had expanded it to include other homebound students, creating an inclusive model that garnered attention from educational organizations across the country. Tommy's bedroom window had become something of a local landmark neighborhood. Children automatically waving as they passed new families, being told the story as part of their welcome to the area. The seasonal decorations surrounding it changing regularly thanks to Janet Chen's Garden Club and the continued enthusiasm of Tommy's growing circle of friends. Perhaps the most meaningful outcome had been the transformation of Tommy himself. From a lonely observer to an active participant in community life, even when physically separated. The shy boy who had once only watched others play becoming a connector, a catalyst for inclusion. His perspective valued his voice, heard his presence acknowledged. Mark reflected on these changes as he and Buddy made their daily walk past the Blue House, stopping, as always, at the special bench that had been installed in the park, the placard reading simply, "A place to notice what matters." The afternoon sunlight catching Tommy's window, where the boy was visible, having one of his now regular video sessions with another immunocompromised child in a different state. The network of window friends continuing to grow and support each other. "Hey," Mr. Davis Tommy called through the partially open window, waving enthusiastically. "I'm showing Sarah how to use the constellation projector Lily made me. She lives in Florida and can't see the same stars." Mark waved back, smiling at Tommy's enthusiasm, his natural generosity in sharing his experiences with others who understood his challenges, the way he had transformed his limitations into expertise that could help similar children. After completing their conversation, Tommy opened his window wider carefully. Positioned at the appropriate distance for outdoor interaction, as the doctors had determined was safe for limited periods. "How's Buddy today?" he asked the golden retriever, looking up at the sound of his name-tail wagging gently. "He's excellent as always," Mark replied. "Ready for story time?" Tommy grinned. A story time that had evolved from Mark reading alone to a community activity with rotating readers, and now included Tommy, occasionally reading sections himself through his window when his health permitted. "I have a new book to share today," he said, holding up a colorful volume about space exploration. "I'm going to read the chapter about astronaut training." As neighborhood children began to gather in the park for the afternoon ritual, Mark observed the easy interactions, the way they positioned themselves naturally to include Tommy's window perspective in their circle. The integration of virtual and physical presence so seamless now that it seemed perfectly normal. The barriers between inside and outside gradually dissolving through creativity, and Cara Lily arrived last, slightly breathless from rushing direct from her science club meeting, taking her usual spot nearest Tommy's window. Their friendship having deepened over the months into a partnership of shared interests and complementary strengths. She had become his most dedicated advocate, helping design increasingly creative ways to include him in activities, while he supported her growing interest in medicine and science with his extensive knowledge from years of research during his confinements. "Ari, I'm late," she apologized. "We were finishing our project on Immune systems. Tommy helped me with the research. Mark smiled at this typical example of their collaborations watching. As Tommy began reading, his voice strong and clear, projecting through the window to his attentive audience the story of astronauts, training for the unknown, resonating with his own journey into previously unexplored territory. Later, as the children dispersed and Mark prepared to continue his walk with Buddy Tommy, called out to him, "Mr. Davis, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Mark," replied always. "Do you think the window matters less now?" Tommy asked, his expression thoughtful. "Now that I can sometimes go outside in my suit, do people think differently about me?" Mark considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "The window will always matter," he said finally, "because it's where our story began. But it's not the whole story anymore. It's become a starting point rather than a barrier." Tommy nodded, processing this perspective. "It's funny," he said, looking out at the park where he had spent so many hours watching before being seen. "I used to think the window kept me from the world, but now I think maybe it just showed me the world in a different way." Mark felt a surge of emotion at the boy's insight. "That's very wise, Tommy," he acknowledged, "and perhaps that's true for all of us. We all have windows that both separate and connect us. The question is whether we choose to look through them with longing or with possibility." As Mark and Buddy continued their walk, he glanced back at the blue house, seeing Tommy still at his window, but now with a tablet in hand, connecting with someone else, sharing his unique perspective with another child who needed to see possibilities rather than limitations. The window that had once isolated him now serving as his doorway to a wider world than any of them had imagined. When a retired teacher had first noticed a lonely boy watching through the glass.